The subway, one of the greatest gifts and curses of New York City. If you've never gotten to experience it for yourself, it might seem pretty scary. There's all these squiggly lines that look like they're going in all different directions. It might seem dangerous to some people, and if you've never been to a big city with a complex transit system before, everything probably looks pretty foreign. But let me assure you, the New York subway system is actually a lot more simple than you might think. By the end of this video, if you pay close attention, you are going to have a fundamental understanding of how the subway system works here, and hopefully you'll feel a little less apprehensive about taking it to get from point A to point B. First things first, if you want to ride the subway, you're going to have to do one of two things. One, get a Metro card, or two, make sure Apple Pay is set up so that when you put your phone up to the scanner, you can get through the turnstile. Okay, so when it comes to getting a Metro card, here's what you're gonna do. First, find a ticket machine, press start, and choose your language. When you're prompted to select a Metro card type, you're gonna press the button in the middle that says Metro card. Now, if you don't have a card yet, you're gonna select Get New Card. If you already have one, then you're gonna select Refill Your Card. Now you're gonna see two options, regular Metro card or unlimited ride. This is probably the most important part because if you select the wrong one, you might end up wasting a lot of money. If you select regular Metro card, you can choose how much value you wanna put on the card, and if you select unlimited ride, you can choose between a 7-day pass or a 30-day pass, which allows you to take as many rides as you want in that time frame. Now, if you're visiting for a short time frame, even if it's just 2 or 3 days, I would recommend getting the unlimited pass for $33. The reason I say this is because you're probably going to be taking the train quite a bit, and each ride costs you $2.75. So if you end up taking more than 12 rides, which you probably will, then you'll have spent more money than you had you gotten the unlimited card. And if you're traveling with family, keep in mind you're gonna have to get one unlimited card for each person because you can't just swipe people in back to back with the unlimited card. See, what the MTA did was smart here. They made it so that once you swipe your unlimited card, there's a 15-minute delay before the next time you can swipe it so that you can't just swipe everyone in. When it comes time to pay for your Metro card, I would personally recommend using a credit card because a lot of the times the ticket machines aren't accepting cash for whatever reason. Also, if you're traveling from outside of the country, when it asks for your zip code, just put 99999. 59. Okay, so this is everything you need to know about the Metro card, but your other option is to just pay with your phone. And for this, you're gonna need to make sure that you have Apple Pay set up. Once you have Apple Pay set up, you're gonna wanna go into your wallet settings and press Express Transit Card. From here, pick which one of your credit cards you want to use to pay for rides, and you're good to go. One cool thing about using your phone to pay is that Omni, the One Metro New York system, has introduced this thing called fare capping, where after paying for 12 rides in the span of a week, all of your subsequent rides are free. While using your phone is definitely the way to go if you're a local, I still wouldn't recommend it for tourists yet. See, this fare capping system tracks your rides in a 7-day period from Monday to Sunday. So if you were to arrive in New York on, say, a Wednesday or Thursday, you would likely end up paying more because the fare capping system resets at the beginning of each work week. Also, if for whatever reason you don't have a Metro card or a phone that can make contactless payments, you can also put your credit card directly on the scanner if it has a chip, and it'll charge you the regular $2.75 to get in. Now personally, I don't really recommend this option, but if you're in a time crunch or you're just not planning on taking the subway very often, then go ahead. So with all the different payment methods available right now, my recommendation would be if you're a tourist, get the 7-day unlimited pass, and if you're gonna be living here, go with the Omni system. When looking at a map of the subway for the first time, it probably just looks like a bunch of squiggly lines. But at least when it comes to Manhattan, the majority of subways run either north or south. But here, people just call it uptown and downtown. In Manhattan, there's 5 main lines that go north and south. Not exactly, but pretty close. They're the ones in blue, red, orange, yellow, and green. But New Yorkers don't call them that. Instead of saying the green line, a New Yorker would call this the 456, and that's because there's 3 different trains that run along these tracks, and they are the 4 train, the 5 train, and the 6 train. Now you might be asking, why are there 3 different trains if they all run on the same line? And well, my answer is, they don't. When going through the middle of Manhattan, these trains might appear to be going on the same line, But if you follow them out to the other boroughs, you'll see that all of a sudden they sprawl out into a bunch of different directions. And now you might be saying, well, if they only split off further down the line, does that mean they're at least the same in Manhattan? And again, the answer would be no, which brings us to the next topic, local versus express. In New York, you have two different types of trains, the local train and the express train. And the difference between these two is that local trains make stops at every station, while express trains only make stops at specific stations, meaning they skip all the local stops. I know this makes things a bit more complicated, but it's actually super helpful because if someone has to travel a longer distance, say from uptown to downtown, they're able to get there in a fraction of the time it would take if they only had local trains. On the other hand, the benefit of having local trains is that you can get pretty close to wherever you need to be, so you don't end up having to walk a super long distance once you get off the train. Now here's a list of all of the trains that are local, and here's one of all of the trains that are express. But let's be real, you're probably not going to remember all of that, especially if it's only your first time. So what you can do instead of memorizing all of this is take a look at the map, and you'll see that each station has either a black dot or a white dot. The black dot means that only local trains make stops at that station, and the white dot means that both local and express trains make stops there. And if you want to be 100% sure, underneath the names of each station on the map, there's a list of numbers and letters that denote which trains stop there. Also, when the train arrives at your station, make sure you keep an eye out to make sure that it's the right one. The last thing you want is to be waiting for a 1 train and then accidentally get on a 2 or a 3 and end up on the other side of town. So now you have a basic understanding of all the different types of trains and what their different functions are, but there's still a few things you need to know before you're ready to go out on your own. Before you even make your way into a subway station, a lot of the time, you're gonna need to make sure that you're on the correct side of the street, because just like cars, the local trains here also only travel on the right side of the road. So if you are facing uptown and you enter a station on the right side of the road, that train is gonna take you uptown. If you're facing downtown and you enter on the right side, you're gonna go downtown. Now, if you know that you're going to a station that has express stops, then you don't need to worry about this. But for a lot of the smaller local stations, this does trip newcomers up, myself included when I first got here. But now you might be asking, well, how do I know which way is north and south? And to that, I would say the best thing you can do is get a general idea of what the skyline looks like in New York. I'm not saying you have to know every building, but if, for example, you see the World Trade Center, you know that's downtown, and if you were to see the Empire State Building, you know that's midtown. Another thing you could do is to keep track of the street numbers when you're walking. So like, if you go from 33rd to 32nd to 31st, you know you're going downtown, and if you go from 59th to 60th to 61st, you know you're headed uptown. Another thing that I could see causing some potential confusion are all of the announcements and different signages that you hear and see when you're either on the subway or waiting at the station. So, for example, when you're on a train, you might hear something like Now, this does not mean that you messed up and are headed straight for the Bronx. All this is saying is that the train is headed in the direction of the Bronx, which is north of Manhattan, or uptown, and the last stop on that train is at Pelham Bay Park. And on a lot of the signs when you're waiting for a subway, you might see something like to Bay Ridge 95th Street and think, well, what the heck does that mean? And all this is saying is that the last stop on the train is at Bay Ridge 95th Street, which is in Brooklyn. Luckily, there is usually something on the sign that says downtown in Brooklyn, but I will say it would definitely be beneficial for you to take a couple minutes to study up on where each of the 5 boroughs are in relation to each other. Also, if you are one of the adventurous souls who has decided to venture out beyond Manhattan into one of the other 4 boroughs, first of all, I applaud you because some of the coolest places in New York are actually outside of Manhattan. And second, you're definitely going to want to make sure that you look out for those signs that say Bronx, Queens, and Brooklyn, because the last thing that you want is to make it all the way out to the middle of the wrong borough. Also, if you are going out to another borough, your best bet is going to be to put the address on your phone because there are lots of nuances when it comes to all of the different lines out there. For example, local trains can become express trains can become local trains. Sometimes there's outer borough express trains, but only during rush hour and only going in one direction. And also, the train service gets a lot less reliable later at night. But luckily, Google Maps and Apple Maps are pretty good about taking all of these factors into account, so in cases like these, just use your phone. The last thing I want to point out is that I know I said the trains primarily go uptown and downtown, but there are a select few that go crosstown, those being the 7, the S, the L, and also certain parts of some of the trains that we talked about earlier. Besides that, if you need to travel east to west, you're probably gonna have to take a bus. But luckily, you get free transfers between trains and buses buses are covered in the unlimited passes that we talked about earlier. Now before you go running to get on your first ever subway, there's a couple unspoken rules that you need to know about so you don't upset any impatient New Yorkers. And with me here today, I have my good friend John, who is a local, born and raised New Yorker, and he's going to be sharing some of the do's and don'ts on the subway. Isn't that right, John? Mm-hmm. Number 1, when you go to enter a subway, don't just walk in without letting everyone else off first. It pisses people off and it messes up the flow. And when it comes to sitting down, don't take up more space than you need or lay down on the seats or do whatever that is. If you're one of those people who decides to listen to music out loud, just know you've instantly become the most hated person on the train, and your music sucks. If you ever see a train that looks suspiciously empty, just know there's probably a reason. Sometimes we end up getting packed like sardines on the train. Make sure you shower, but not on the train. And lastly, avoid awkward eye contact. You're either gonna creep someone out or invite some attention you might not be ready for.